Hello everybody, welcome back to Forza Horizon 5 with, well, a 1,800 horsepower buggy that does not appear to be using all of its horsepower. No, it's very quiet because what it's doing right now is a little thing called SOAPBOXing. You hold the clutch in and you roll it down the hill instead of using your engine. And in previous Forza games, you couldn't really go all that fast, even on here, with this pretty fast downhill slalom, if you will. It's only hitting about 60, maybe 70 miles an hour. But, unlike all of the other previous Forza games, this mountain has a very specific side. A side that's smooth, steep, and most importantly, clear of rocks and bumps. So we have a perfect downhill section to see just how fast we can go. And that would be our challenge. How fast can you get a car without using the engine? Now, obviously, I don't have a lot of vehicles. I'm recording this Sunday before the game comes out for normal purchases. It comes out Tuesday. So I don't have everything. I've been playing the game for 48 hours, roughly. So, these are a combination of wheel spins, cars that I've won in competition, or cars I found on the auction house. A lot of them were from auction house bids that I managed to sort of get for cheap. So, it's a bit of a mismatch of vehicles, but in the end, I think we were able to get a pretty good consensus on what is fast, because I've never actually built a car for this, to be honest. I didn't know what I was doing, because, well, you don't need to upgrade an engine, you don't need to upgrade a gearbox, so I gave it as slippery of the aero as possible, taking out the rear wings, adding some splitters that are aerodynamic than the Forza aero, or side skirts and whatnot, and I gave it maximum tires, maximum suspension, rally suspension with off-road race tires, and as much weight as I possibly could, just to try and get them downhill faster while in control. The more control, the higher the speed. I had the idea, I had a fair few cars lying around the garage that seemed suitable, so I gave it a try. Now, a car that I've used in the past for speedruns, especially one that's where you focus on aerodynamics rather than outright horsepower, is surprisingly the BAC Mono. I know it's a track car, but when you take all the aerodynamics off, it's actually very streamlined, so I thought I would give it a try here. So it's got the suspension, it's got the tires, it's got the whole 9 yards, and it wasn't very quick. Okay? This was the second car that I built, and I won't say that I was inexperienced behind the wheel of these, but I thought it was a pretty decent run, especially as I progressed. I thought my runs were pretty consistent across the range. And the Mono, it just wasn't quick. It wasn't. No. I don't really understand why. Because there are cars that will come up that are less aerodynamic than this, that are lower ride height than this, and they did better. So I don't understand why the Mono struggled. Maybe it just didn't like the bumps. Maybe it had just simply too much aero at that speed. I'm not 100% sure why this was a complete failure. But it only hit 164 miles an hour, which is actually kind of better than I was initially expecting for being a soapbox off-road. I was kind of impressed by that as a baseline, but compared to the vehicles that will be coming later, it's not that quick. It's not that quick at all. Which means we had to move on to the complete other end of the spectrum and go, well, back in time to the Lola T70. This is another sort of aerodynamic focused vehicle, very streamlined for Le Mans, for Can-Am racing, for endurance racing as well. And I thought, considering it has a whopping 4 pounds of downforce from its aerodynamics, according to Forza, it would be pretty good. And, you know, I thought it would work very well. These classic race cars historically are very good at speedrunning. But again, not in this case. It's faster, but it's only 4 miles an hour faster, doing 168. It's not bad, but it's not exactly great. Now, I should preface this. All of the cars got 2 runs down the hill, and I'm showing you the fastest runs of each vehicle, okay? Just for clarification. And even more surprising, for me anyway, is that this classic race car was tied with this not at all classic race car, the Nissan Fairlady Z Forza Edition, which I threw in here simply because it looked awesome. It's like a Baja version of a sports car. It's very cool. It has no aerodynamics at all, but, you know, it has good suspension and it's a sports car, so I figured I'll give it a try. I didn't think it was going to win, but I thought it would do worse than the Lola, and it did the exact same. There were a few ties in this challenge, and this was the first of many. This next vehicle is a perfect illustration of why you will not see very many off-road vehicles on this list. Despite being exclusively off-road with a jump, I'm only including, I think, 2 proper off-road vehicles on this entire list. And this is the first one, the Nissan pickup truck Dakar. It looks amazing. I'm very glad it's in Forza. It's always great to see new vehicles, especially something this far outside of the box. But it wasn't quick, and this is a problem that all of the Dakar vehicles shared. They were simply too big. They had the aerodynamics of a barn. And while that's perfectly fine for running through the off-road deserts and whatnot, it's not so great when you're trying to go downhill on aerodynamics and gravity alone. So, yeah. It wasn't bad. It cracked 170 doing 171 miles an hour, but, left a lot to be desired, I think is the word I'm looking for. So, we move on after the relative disappointment of the Dakar vehicles to our next fastest car, the complete other end of the spectrum, the Toyota Camry Nascar with a 2JZ in it. Yeah, a whopping 3 miles an hour further up the road at 174 miles an hour. I threw this in specifically because it's a stock car. It's an honest-to-God stock car designed for oval racing, which means it's very aerodynamic. And again, like the Mono, I really don't know why this struggled. I don't. It had suspension, it had tires, it had the aerodynamics. I took all the aero off to make it as streamlined as possible because we're not trying to turn here, we're trying to get top speed. And it just wasn't quick. It just wasn't. I love it. It's mad that it's in the game, but it was not rapid. So, we had to think a little bit smaller. And by smaller, I mean going to Renault's Alpine division for the brand new A110. A whopping 1 mile an hour faster than the Camry at 175 miles an hour. The A110 was a thing I threw it in there because it was small, it was light, and I had it in my garage. You'll see a few of these from this point on. I just sort of threw them in here because why not? They seemed okay. There's some logic to it being in here, so let's give it a shot. And it was better than I expected, actually. This is the very first car I ran. I'm gonna be honest, this is the very first car that I ran. And it did 175, so I thought this was gonna be pretty good. And then things just kept getting worse. The Mono showed up. I had a pre-runner that did terribly. That got less than 160. I mean, it was way downhill after the A110. I was very surprised. Especially because just 1 mile an hour further up the road is a 1953 Corvette. The C1. Yeah, it's got the fin and it's got the one-seater like the Sterling Moss SLR. But it's from 1953. It's not exactly designed in a wind tunnel. Yes, it's got the bipedals removed and it's all streamlined and everything, but I didn't actually think it would do that well. And it did good. 176. I was very impressed with the C1. It was horrifically slow trying to get it up to the edge to go over into its starting position, but when it eventually got there, it achieved some pretty good speeds. It's one of the few cars on this list that is actually faster with the engine off than with the engine on in this situation. Not a thing I was expecting to say, but there we go. Now just 2 miles an hour further up the road is its brand new newest cousin, the C8 Corvette. The C1 did 176, the C8, with the wide body kit giving it more grip, did 178 miles an hour. Now why the Speed Hunter kit without the rear wing? Well, obviously you take off the wing to reduce drag, but the Speed Hunter kit, despite being very low to the ground and probably scraping on a leaf, gives you much bigger tires, and I wanted as much grip as possible to carry the speed through that slight kink as we approach the jump, because you can get a little bit squirrely if you don't have enough grip there. It's super fast, super bumpy, relative speaking, for some of these cars, and it causes a little bit of a squirrely moment if you don't have enough grip, and it just makes it easier to drive, more consistent on top of that. So yeah, I was impressed with the C8. I was a little apprehensive about using the body kit because it is so low, even with the rally suspension, but I think it did very respectable. I was very impressed with the vet. And now you're gonna see how close everything is, because just 2 miles an hour further up the road from that is the Supra Mark III. I tried the Supra Mark V, that was terrible, but the Mark III, that was actually pretty good. 180 miles an hour, the first car to hit the 180 mile an hour plus barrier, if you will. Again, this was a body kit motivated decision I had in my garage, and I know that applying body panels, as hideous as they look, mean you can actually get quite a bit of speed out of it simply by changing the rear wing or the side skirts, even the hood. In one case, improved the top speed by 0.2 of a mile an hour. So there is some method to my madness for using these 90s, early 2000s sports cars on a downhill mountain stage, and the Supra actually did a pretty good job cracking the 180 mile an hour barrier. Especially because just 1 mile an hour further up the road is the AMG Project 1, technically speaking the most powerful car here, nearly 900 horsepower, not that we would actually use it. Yeah, this did 181, and this is also the only car I didn't use in a race, because this has race mode. Now, if you hit one of the joysticks, I think it's the left one, and you press it down for a second and hold it, you can actually change the aerodynamics on some vehicles, and this is one of those vehicles, which means you can take it into VMAX mode, where you have no downforce, it's top speed only. And I thought, well, let's give it a try. So it got the usual treatment, racing or rally suspension, not that you can see it so low, and off-road tires and maximum tire widths. And I was disappointed. I'll be honest, I was disappointed. It felt like a pretty good run. It had the aerodynamics, it was modern, it had the suspension technology, it had the aerodynamic technology, and it just didn't perform. Like the Mono, it just was, yeah. That's how I'll say it. Yeah. So there you go. Now the next two vehicles, actually, are a tie. And it's a very strange tie. On one hand, we have the Porsche 959 Dakar. A pretty suitable choice, I think. It's a sports car that was the fastest production car in the world, but it's also a rally raid vehicle. Sort of the best of both worlds. It's already got the rally suspension, it's already got the rally tires, and it already has the aerodynamics. And it did 183. Again, I was sort of expecting better, but, you know, I guess you gotta set your expectations somewhere, and I was starting by this time to gauge how fast the cars were expected to go. So it's not out of the realm of frustration, also not out of the realm of exceptionalism. It's just sort of good. It was very controllable, I can say that much, and I did make sure to take all the downforce off. But the even sadder thing is that it's tied with this. The Auto Union Type D, the full-on 1930s Grand Prix cars, the streamliners. Now, in terms of horsepower relative to top speed, these are some of the best cars in the world. They have less than 400 horsepower, and certainly the proper streamliner version of the Auto Union could hit 240 miles an hour. So this is going to be my big gun. This is one of the last cars I ran. You know? Bring out the big guns for last, the ultimate streamliner aerodynamic thing where safety doesn't exist. And it was the same as a 959 from the 80s. I don't understand. I have no clue about this vehicle. It's got the suspension, it's got the tires, it's got maximum tire widths. It just wasn't quick. Admittedly, I have no clue how to tune for this, because we're not actually doing anything other than holding the clutch. And I have no clue the full build process. I did my best. I was able to do some tweaks here and there, just to see how it would go. But, I don't know, maybe I'm doing something wrong. But this really surprised me. I thought I would do better, and did not. So, that was, on that slightly disappointing note, we move over to Japan. Because our second fastest car of the day is a late 90s Mitsubishi Eclipse that looks like that. Yeah, I'll be honest, once I figured out all of the body parts, they're the exact same. I just sort of made them as ugly as possible, because why not? So that is, if you believe it, a Mitsubishi Eclipse. And all of that has a reason. There is some rhyme to that insanity. It all is in the sake of increasing top speed with aerodynamics. And it worked. Unlike the Auto Union, unlike the Supra, this was actually one of the closest to hitting 190 miles an hour. Surprisingly. I just threw this in here because it was in my garage. That's the only reason I threw this in. And it was very good. 186 miles an hour is incredibly quick without an engine, just downhill. And it's a sports car for like 20,000 credits. The whole build, I bought out at the auction house for 5,000 credits. The whole build was less than 30 grand. It's ridiculous how good that car was. And I don't understand why. Some cars have done terribly that should be doing great, and some cars are terrible but are actually doing fantastic, and this is the latter category. But nothing, in terms of surprises, surpassed the winner. The Jaguar XJ220. Yeah, this is an auction house car, got it for 200 grand, it was a great deal, and I just sort of threw it in there because it was, again, the fastest production car in the world, like the 959. Only this was not the Dakar vehicle. Yeah, I could take the wing off, yeah, I raised the suspension, yeah, I got better tires, but I was not expecting much, to say the least, and I got a lot. I got 195 miles an hour. It was so close to 200, it was so close. I honestly thought I could do it. This was halfway through the build process, and I thought I could do it. So, disappointing, but there you go. I was really hoping for this car to hit 200, because this gave me high hopes after I successfully did 195 in this thing, for reasons, again, I do not fully understand, but apparently a 90s supercar is very good down dirt mountain. Yeah, there you go. I am very confused now. I tried the XKR15, that wasn't very good. I tried a few other 90s sports cars. I tried the Ford GT, both generations. None of those were very successful. I'm very confused. I have to give this another go in a few months as I accrue more vehicles and have more experience, but as of right now, putting my timestamp on it, if you want to go fast without an engine, get a Jag XJ220. But that will be it for this episode of Forza Horizon 5, and I'll be back with more